chamber, and any private items on the agenda, the live stream will cease prior to the meeting, before moving into private, and there might be a short delay in that process. A recording of the public part of the meeting will be available on the council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. All attendees are required to wear masks on entry to the building and the meeting rooms, but may remove them when you are seated. Would members and officers please remember to switch microphones on when speaking and speak directly into the phones and switch off when you're finished. Any officers that are called upon the portfolio holders should address the executive using the microphones marked when presenting at the rear of the council chambers. And please do switch off or put your phones on silent. There's no fire drills planned, so in case of fire, please follow the exit signs and assemble at the St. George's Square. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Golding, Roach and Simmons.
Thank you. Do we agree with the published records of the meeting held on 31st of January and 9th of February? Can I see? Thank you. Any members affected by section 106? No. Any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests? No. There are two items that are not covered by forward business plan and are in the general exception. The first item is about corporate performance report for Q3, and the second one is temporary technology director's report. So I hand over to Andy.
Thank you. So the corporate performance report, not the technology director one. Right? Yes. Okay. I'll present the performance report for the third quarter of this financial year to begin with. This is an update on where we're at. We have one each quarter and then an end of year position as well. We're still in the position where by and large our performance has been severely impacted by the pandemic. So not many of the indicators are where we thought they might be because the pandemic has had such a widespread and deep impact across everything that the council does. However, there are a few things in the report that are worth noting. So we've moved to a system where those providing the data now have to input the data themselves, and it's really apparent throughout the whole report actually. If you look through for the written commentary, you've got the name of the report author, so each paragraph of like narrative on the report on the performance actually has someone who's responsible for that service area outlining where the performance is at. So to me it felt like it was a lot clearer. I got a better feel for kind of where the performance was at across all the various areas that are measured. So that's really positive actually, and you can see the value of it throughout. There are some new areas of reporting. So before now I've mentioned that the reducing carbon emissions measures are not fully developed. They're still not in there in as much detail in the actual report as they will be in the future, but you can see on page 20 of the report that there are a number of things that are going to be measured there, a number of bullet points set across there. There are, I think, 3 or 4 in the actual report that are actually got data for them. But there's some good thinking that's gone on there around how to measure reducing net carbon emissions. And actually on the previous page, on page 19, there's some new metrics around improving children's lives, which some of which are in the report as well. Not all of them, again, are there in detail as yet. In terms of the performance across the piece, the airport is recovering. We all know how important the airport is to us. So airport passengers increased from 1.85 million to 1.88 million in Q3 from Q2. Which I think, trying to do the maths quickly, it's not half yet, but it's getting on towards half of where we were at in pre-pandemic times. In terms of new claims and changes, in terms of the front desk and dealing with those changes for our residents, the performance is within target. It's kind of moved a little bit closer towards where we think the acceptable level is, but it's still within target, which is positive. Households offered a permanent offer through the housing register has increased from 45 in Q2 to 51 in Q3. And homeless applications, the rate between homeless applications and acceptances has risen from 12% to 14%. You actually want it to be fairly low. The narrative in the report tells you that, but we've got a target of 25%, so that is positive. And the proportion of registered care services that are rated good or outstanding is at 71%, and you can see that the schools rated good or outstanding has increased over recent measures as well, which is positive too. I'll leave it there. I'll move the recommendations of the report and take any questions if there are any.
Andy, are there any questions? David?
Thank you for that, Councillor Malcolm. What are we doing in terms of mitigation? Because obviously we've had a number of periods where we haven't moved, we've stagnated the corporate runs. Is there any plans? Or what's the outlook? Do we think we're going to start catching up with some of the KPIs?
So if you read paragraph, find it in the report, 4 of the report, that's where it outlines that, you know, a lot of the impact has come from COVID, but the impact is still being felt. I'm quoting now. However, the council is beginning to see a rise in performance again with the easing of lockdown restrictions and services adapting to the challenges and new ways of working. So we've been seriously impacted, but actually we're starting to move back to a position where we can expect our performance indicators to be moving back to where we would hope they would be.
No? Do we agree with the report? Thank you. Urgent business. We have 2 references from overview and scrutiny. Sorry. Oh, you were going to do. I'm sorry.
There we go, my mic's working. Excellent. So my second report is it's a technical one, really. We have to bring it to exec because it involves moving budgets around. The actual technicality is outlined at paragraph 8 of the report. So because what's being proposed by our officers involves a environment between areas that are the responsibility of more than one portfolio holder, a decision has to be taken by the executive. So this is a technically required report which allows our officers to get in place the temporary structure for the next 18 months. It's outlined in the report to support ICT development and delivery for the next period, which we're quite excited about looking to do some changes with. It's about the separation of 2 roles and actually putting an IT director temporarily in place to really get going with some of that stuff that's actually going to have a really positive benefit across the piece and allow some of the transformation savings hopefully to be achieved. So I'll leave it at that because it's essentially a technicality. I'll move the recommendation at paragraph 1.
Questions? No? Do we agree with the report? Thank you. Coming on to the OSP, there were 2 recommendations on law, neighbourhood and traffic. That report will be presented at future meetings, and the other one is on housing. Shall we take the housing with your housing report? Would that be? If that's
involved in it. So we were just going to accept the recommendation tonight and then it can start going through the system.
Are you okay with that, David?
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy with that, Chair. Thank you. The resolution was unanimously supported at OSB, and looking at the enthusiasm of all of the members there, I can guarantee that if you do look for a volunteer ward councillor to help you identify an area, there will be no shortage of volunteers, Chair.
Just accept the recommendation. That's all I was going to do, Chair.
So Yeah, we accept the recommendations in note. Yeah. For the housing, part of the main report, so we'll come on to that. Okay. Right, so there's no petitions, and I move on to item now 8, and this is a vacancy which is come out after Paul Castleman's death. We had Khatija, and she's now resigned, and what we're proposing is that Maria Lovell is replaced on the Crawley Green Sports and Social Club with immediate effect. Is that agreed?
Yes, but it's Councillor Castleman replaced by Maria at Crawley Green and Khatija replaced with Umi at the Citizen Advice.
I have the.
Yeah, number 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that agreed?
Yeah.
Is mine. So the executive is recommended to approve the amalgamation of Foxtel Infant School and Foxtel Junior School. As you would find, and is set out in Appendix A, it's about facilitating the amalgamation of Foxtel Infant and Junior Schools to form a new primary school. And the reason for that is that to create an all-through primary school in the existing premises of the Foxtel Infant School and Foxtel Junior School, it is anticipated that amalgamation would further enhance the cohesive pastoral and educational provision for the children throughout their primary years. There will also be improved continuity of learning and development aided by pupils not having to change schools at the end of year 2. This change would also give further financial security to the school in the long term, and budgets are allocated to all schools in the basis of a formula which gives the bulk of the money according to the number of the pupils on roll. Thus, the fewer pupils a school has, the less money it has to spend, and more the school has, the more money it has to spend. So that's the purpose of amalgamating school, and it makes a good sense. So therefore, I move the report. Are there any questions? Agreed? Thank you. The 10 is about setting up a governing board for adult and learning. And I'm asking the committee to approve setting up a partnership body for the governing board for Luton adult learning. And the background to this is that Ofsted inspectors use the education inspection framework to make their judgments about further education and skills providers in order to judge a provider's overall effectiveness. Key judgments are made about leadership and management, although it is not a legal requirement to have a governing board, but as the council remains the lead accountable body, it is regarded as a good practice by Ofsted. As such, the Adult Learning Service requests the executive committee agreement set up a partnership body for the governing body, which consists of members and officers and representation alongside external partners. Questions on that? Do we agree? Thank you. One is mine again, and this is about Luton employment and skill strategy for from 2022 and 2027. The strategy is a key pillar of the borough's pursuit of inclusive growth and is essential to 2040 ambition to tackle poverty and transform lives. It directly feeds into creating fair employment and good work for all. Luton needs to ensure all jobs are good quality as efforts to increase employment are introduced after the pandemic. Our vision is to make sure that no one is left behind, that all our residents can fulfill their potential whilst recognizing that this will look different for different people. The key focus of this strategy is to enable our residents to fulfill their potential by ensuring our young people understand their skills and career pathways, upskilling those furthest from the labor market, and retaining those who are highly qualified, and reskilling career changes and those who are aged over 50. We do recognize within this there are specific groups who face structural barriers and who will need to target, such as for those people who are long-term unemployed, people from BME backgrounds and needs, care leavers, and where needed, these will be supported by specific action plans. And by having a skilled pool of people aligned to their local job opportunities will also support businesses to grow and prosper by aligning skills to meet the needs of the employers now and in the future. The strategy has been co-designed with a wide variety of stakeholders, including businesses in our communities, and is built upon strategic priorities, and there's 4 of them. Skills driving economic recovery and growth, developing a pipeline of talented and resilient people, tackling long-term inequality and economic activity, and creating an adaptable upskill force. The strategy provides a framework for focusing our efforts. Partners are asked to provide pledges on how they will embed this in their own organizational plans, and for specific activities that we have an implementation plan which identifies the key areas where we need to work collectively to maximize impact. Some activities will be borough-wide, and it will be critical that we ensure that local communities are aware and are able to access the local offer. Other initiatives will be based in the community, particularly our most deprived areas. We will continue to co-design solutions with the community, anchoring activities in the bottom-up approach. The plan reflects the context of pandemic and the impact on our economy, which has been accelerated some employer skills demands as the shift towards digital platform and hybrid working. We now have the framework and activities to allow us to recover and grow, ensuring we maximize the opportunities from major projects and regeneration in Luton, and Luton, as well as providing hooks for the future funding opportunities. And this is all particularly pertinent given the recent levelling up white paper and potential opportunities through the Shared Prosperity Fund and when it arrives. I'm happy to take any questions. Or accept the strategy. Thank you. Right, we now item 12, which is revenue and capital budget monitoring report, and I believe that's you, Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, this is the, again, 3rd quarter, we're at that time of the year, report on our finances. So this is the monitoring of the budget that we set over a year ago now for 21-22, telling us how we're getting on in terms of our spending, whether it's in line with that budget or not. This is actually the last report that will come before the end of year outturn after the year end accounts. I'm really pleased to report that there's been quite considerable movement from Q2 to Q3. So we're now actually reporting a net surplus of 0.5 million, which is after the use of the general coronavirus grants and savings delivery contingencies and some one-off gains in borrowing costs as well. The budget is complex and has been hit by the pandemic as much as anything else. So there's the effects of the coronavirus pandemic in our budget. Some of those are mitigated, quite a lot of those mitigated by some additional grant support. but from central government. We've got the delivery of the savings programme, which in part itself was the consequence of the pandemic. So the total savings programme over the last few years is 38 million. And then we've got demand-led pressures underlying all of that as well, which we've been, working on and trying to deal with. So the support from the government around coronavirus looks like 6.7 million of grant support. And actually, if I can find the right place, it's paragraph 17 outlines how that's been spent. So nearly 1.5 million is related to coronavirus costs and services to provide support in relation to those things. Over 4 million of that has been used to offset trading and commercialisation losses, and then just over 1 million has been used to meet some of the delays to our ability to deliver the saving programme. So yeah, a saving programme of 38 million over the last few years. We've actually managed to deliver 28 million now. So really making some good progress, but some of those have been delayed because of the impacts of lockdowns, etc. In terms of those underlying demand-led pressures, it's important to note recommendation 2. So there's a £2.397 million reduction in the net overspend on core services to 6.154 million at quarter 3. And that's before we use the coronavirus support grants. And actually the detail of all the services and where they're at is set out at paragraph 15. It's really long, but paragraph 15 gives the detail service area by service area as to the main overspends and underspends in terms of those different areas, which is a good place to look for the detail of kind of where our budget's at and what's going on underneath the surface. So some of these demand-led pressures have been offset by deploying specific contingencies that we've had in our budget to help phase those savings. Also by releasing some of the contingencies that we had in place because those savings have been delivered. So there's some savings where we've not delivered them, but we had a contingency in place. There's others where we've delivered them, we had a contingency in place, and that can now be released because we don't need it anymore because we've made the saving. So that helps as well. And then we've also used some of the general coronavirus support grant to cover some of the impact of delays. There's also savings from doing internal borrowing that are above and beyond what we had in our budget, which have helped to balance us and get us to this position of net surplus, which actually also doesn't any longer include the use of the council's general contingency budget. So it had been released in the forecasting at quarter 2. And that's all made clear in the report, how we're kind of getting to that end figure, but it's being held now centrally. So things may emerge over quarter 4. They did last year. We've tried to learn from that so they won't again, but that general contingency for the whole council is now being held centrally and isn't released into this forecast. The biggest changes are set out at paragraph 9. So actually the very biggest positive change is the release of some of the contingencies that are no longer needed because we've made those savings, we've actually achieved them. We've had a reduction in spend on homelessness because we've had 52 tenancies moving out of temporary accommodation into permanent housing. That's nearly over £800,000, that saving. And then there's some areas of overspend that have come into the budget. So nearly 700,000 overspend on SEN transport and over 400,000 overspend on highways maintenance. As I say, the headline figure is that we're predicting a net surplus of just over £500,000, and that's with that central contingency being held and not deployed into the overall budget position at this stage. I think with that, I will move the reports. Just to say, actually, paragraph 19 onwards, I think it is. 19 talks about the capital programme, and I think it's paragraph, let's find it, 16 talks about the other budgets as well, all the other budgets. So public health, housing revenue account and the schools budget are all predicting an underspend at this point in the year, as is the capital programme. So with that, I'll move the recommendations set out at paragraph 1 and take any questions.
Thank you, Andy. Any questions? No? Do we agree the report? Okay. Moving on to the insurance services, I believe that's also you, Andy.
Yeah, thank you. So this, again, is essentially a technicality. Well, we wouldn't want to be without insurance cover. and we've got to a position where we're going to need to extend our existing insurance cover with our existing provider in line with what we've got in place with them to be able to get all the detail in place to go out to tender for a new for a full procurement exercise that will give us a new insurer. So the details are set out at paragraph 4 in terms of what's covered by this insurance. The reasons for delay are set out at paragraph 5. The solution is this 3-month contract that's on the existing terms with our existing provider. The costs are set out at paragraph 8. The benefits are of being insured, and we wouldn't want to not be insured, but also there may be some operational benefits as well that are set out in paragraph 10 around actually we won't be buying insurance at the same time of year that everyone else is buying insurance, so there'll be a bit more capacity both internally and potentially externally with insurers, so we might possibly get a better deal, but it's hard to quantify that. But again, it's essentially a technical report, so I'll move the recommendation at paragraph 1.
Questions? No? Agreed? To integrated transport, highway maintenance and street lighting, and that's over to you, Tom, as Rob is not with us today.
The recommendations in front of you, Chair. Item part 3 of the recommendation is, as you know, the spending review took place last October. We've got a very ambitious programme for cycle lanes, extra street lights, low energy street lights, pedestrian work to make it safe for pedestrians, but a lot of it is what allocation we get out of the spending review. We put our plans together, the officers have already started drawing up schemes. All we need now is confirmation of what money we've got for what. And when we've got that, we can get on with it. But you say it's a very ambitious programme, especially with the cycling lanes and everything else. All we need is confirmation now of the government that we've got the money available to do it. So with that, I'll move the recommendation, Chair, and hopefully the government will come up with the money it promised in the October spending review.
Any questions? Abbas?
Who am I asking the questions to? Tom? So Tom, you turn to page 1 sec. So there's few pointers here, yeah? So most of the roads do not align with the wards. So can Roger or somebody look at that, yeah, because they don't align with the ward. So yeah, so Churchill Road is Biscuit Ward, but is in Dalla Ward. Dunstable Road is in Chorney Ward. The Stretch Kingsway Conway, you know what I mean, is in Dalla Biscuit, but it's not in Chorney Ward. So there's a few in here. Avondale Road again is in Dalla Ward, not Biscuit Ward. Yeah. If you turn to page 278, 2024-2025 highways, yeah, you got Harefield Road in there again for resurface, when in this year it's already been resurfaced at £60,000, and then in 2 years' time is in there again for another £33,000. Can you explain that, please?
Chair, Sandra Commissari, who's the Highway Services. Hi, Sandra. Capital Program Manager is here with us virtually tonight, so hopefully she can address those questions. Sandra?
Yes, with a lot of the roads, they do cover more than one ward. So where you will have, for example, Dunstable Road is in about 3 different wards in total. If you have a query about the extent, then please raise that and we will look at that. In terms of roads appearing in more than 1 year, it's based on the condition of that section of the road, because it is budget led in terms of the priority.
So it will be resurfaced again in 2 years' time again, a full length of it?
No, not the full length. It shouldn't be the full length. So if there are queries there, please can you raise the actual, if they also fill extent, please raise that with us. Okay,
Sandra, the second question now is, what sort of category do you work on assessing the roads?
It's a national indicator. It's called SCRIM data. Which is, it basically looks at the condition of the road. So you have CVI, SVI and SCRIM surveys. which it's one of my colleagues would deal with. If you want further information on that, and then we can go through that with you.
Okay. And
See part of Lee Grade High Street has been done. The rest of the Lee Grade High Street, the Lee Grade part, is not due till next year. So you'd have Lee Grade High Street down twice in the programme, but it's in 2 separate years.
okay. And the LCWIP, the cycling, local cycling and walking improvement plan, yeah? How come that's not embodied into this structure?
Because it's not
still out to
complete.
consultation at the moment.
Sorry?
So it's still out to consultation now, Bess.
Ah, okay. So it's still out to consultation. So if that is approved,
Lots of replies to the consultation, an awful lot.
okay. So the cycling plan for 2022 to 2023 will not have that consultation in those figures that where you're mentioning cycling routes or anything like that.
We'll bring a separate report on
You'll
the
bring a
LT
separate
whip
report,
to
okay.
executive.
Yep. Thank you.
No, we agree with the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you. Good evening.
Item 19, powers to require drivers to switch off their engines, and that's over to you again, pollution and well-being.
Yes, Chair, it's not going to be popular. A lot of people won't like it, but a lot of councils have done it now, and I believe we've got no option but to come forward with it, especially outside schools and everything else. A lot of people actually mentioned about enforcement, how the enforcement will happen, but we have a lot of our traffic enforcement officers are outside schools on a regular basis and everything else. I don't think it'll take too long for the message to get out that we're not going to sit there and allow people just to pollute the atmosphere so they can keep warm in the car for 10 minutes when they're blocking the entrance to people's driveways and everything else. So my view is we accept the recommendations, we go forward and see what happens. We will get some kickback on it, but from our climate change point of view, I don't believe we've got any option but to do it.
Any questions on that? Yep, David?
A comment, if you don't mind, from Overview and Scrutiny Board again. Yeah, this was again supported by members of the board wholeheartedly. And it's quite clear that it will be heavily supported by parents who walk their children to school. But it won't be supported by those who drive their children to school. There is obviously here an educational challenge for the council to get the message across, but it has to be backed up by enforcement. Otherwise it won't work. And that was the general view of Overview and Scrutiny Board when they looked at it, although they didn't actually pass a resolution for reference to executive.
David? So take it as generally agreed and accepted. Thank you. Moving on to Luton housing strategy, Tom.
Well, we accept the recommendation will come through from the Overview and Scrutiny Board about looking at the Oxford scheme. I wish it was a bit wider and we look at other schemes up and down the country, but we've got to do something about HMOs in the town. We've got to do something about HMOs in certain parts of the town where roads are getting full and everything else. It won't be housing what'll do it. It'll come through housing, but the recommendation will have to be from, I understand it, after talking to solicitors from Development Control, that Development Control impose the orders in those areas. But we're quite happy to get on with it, do the work, get the evidence, and then pass it on to Development Control because we know how stretched they are for people. Rather than go all through the report, if you go to page 354 of the report, it tells you everything we're going to be doing. It's all down there in those next couple of pages. It's very ambitious, 400 houses in the private sector, a lot of building, licensing scheme, fetch it in across the town by 2025. Hopefully we can keep on top of it and we can encourage the officers to make sure they get it all done. If we can get it done, I'll be very pleased. It is ambitious. But we accept the recommendations from scrutiny as well, so we just want to go away and start getting on with it now, Chair.
Any questions? Agree the report?
Thank you.
Thank you. There's no items in private, so this meeting comes to an end.